Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. I have awoken from my slumber and I had the most wonderful dream being bestowed upon a new set of Raycon's everyday earbuds. Oh my god, look at that, they're real. Next time I should dream about a briefcase full of money. And with that money, I can easily afford more Raycon everyday earbuds. They not only pack premium sound quality, but they're much more affordable than the other big names in the market. They're weatherproof and sweat resistant, built to last, come in a variety of fun new colors. They got 32 hours of battery life thanks to the rechargeable carrying case, active noise cancellation to tune out all the noise this coming election season, and their ergonomic design and their optimized gel tips ensures a comfortable fit no matter the size of your ears. And as someone who's been rocking a pair for several years now, Raycons are easily my preferred earbuds for everyday activities like house cleaning or folding laundry that I never put away, or going out for a short walk before the teenagers come out and scare me. And you can get a pair for yourself by visiting the link in the description below buyraycon.com/Somecallmejohnny for a 20 to 40% discount across the entire site. I'll repeat that, 20 to 40% across the whole site. The end of summer is approaching, so don't wait until you're already ball and chained in college to take advantage of this great deal. As always, your support is greatly appreciated and the reason why I can even get these deals in the first place. So from me to you, thank you. Now let's continue on with the show.
Oh, he just donkey kicked my tit, dude.
You good?
Hey everyone, I know it's been a bit and I'm sorry for making some of you worry, but I also want to apologize because I got a feeling that a few of you saw this in their subscription feed and thought, god damn, he's never getting to Final Fantasy VIII, is he? But today's subject matter holds a lot of sentimentality for me for various reasons, and if I simply ignored it for the sake of getting to the high profile game from a series I love, well, I'd be no better than those from the late 90s who simply glossed over it.
Speaking of which, the late 90s was a very lucrative time for Square. The success of Final Fantasy VII catapulted the company into the stratosphere, and with newfound fame and reception, Square was becoming confident enough to branch out and experiment with new IPs. Games like Parasite Eve, Xenogears, the oodles and oodles of Final Fantasy spin-offs like Tactics, Chocobo Race, and Chocobo Dungeon. These were just some games Square fed into the PlayStation to expand their library, but their flagship series Final Fantasy would always be front and center in the general consumer's mind. Knowing this, and because they did something similar for Final Fantasy VII to much success, Square would make a demo disc for their upcoming Final Fantasy VIII. But you see, with Square, instead of just offering it to consumers through newsletters, magazine subscriptions, which was common practice at the time, I lost track of the amount of PlayStation Underground demo samplers I had growing up because of that shit, but anyway, Square would often bundle demo discs with new releases to not only increase potential sales of new IPs, but to get people excited for their next mainstream project with a hands-on approach. The Final Fantasy VII demo, well, one of them anyway, was attached to Tobal No. 1, a 1996 fighting game, and that alone, especially in Japan, was enough to make that game a moderate success. Now, I never heard anyone actually talk about Tobal No. 1 itself, but to Square they probably only cared about the sales numbers anyway. So repeating this practice again with the upcoming Final Fantasy VIII, Square attached a demo of that game to this little title here called Brave Fencer Musashi, an action RPG released in the West in late 1998. And while not a smash hit, Brave Fencer Musashi was by no means a failure. It even got a spiritual follow-up on the PlayStation 2 that I will begrudgingly talk about some other time. It's just, it was very likely the only reason folks even bothered getting this game at all was to sample Final Fantasy VIII.
As for me, my discovery of this game goes back to 1999. I'm crashing over at my grandpa's house one night, and occasionally we would have our cousins over with their PlayStation and their selection of games. And among the sports games, the WWF titles, I think there was a Medal of Honor in there somewhere in there as well, there was Brave Fencer Musashi, and I gotta tell you, it stuck out like a motherfucker. But I was intrigued because not only did I like the design of the character on the cover, which, fun fact, Tetsuya Nomura handled character designs in this game, but this game was from Squaresoft, and yeah, on the bottom right, I saw it had a demo for Final Fantasy VIII. And considering how much I loved 7, Final Fantasy in general, I did try out the demo first, like a lot of others did. And originally, I wasn't convinced by this. The demo for 8 didn't really grab me, and not kidding, that was the main reason why I initially didn't get Final Fantasy VIII when it was originally released on the PlayStation 1. I mean, Final Fantasy VIII was already out for almost a year at this point by the time I played the demo for it, but after experiencing it and realizing I wasn't really jiving with it, it sort of validated my initial hesitancy to even play the game. But I feel I should save that for the Final Fantasy VIII video because there's a lot to unpack there.
But with the demo properly sampled, I then turned my attention on Brave Fencer Musashi itself, and it truly was love at first play. It was also, if I'm not mistaken, my first action RPG. Before there was a Kingdom Hearts in my world, there was Brave Fence and Musashi. I was used to number crunching and cooking up strategies with menu-based combat. But here, all of it was happening in real time with magical swords and giant robots. I want to remind everyone that I was 12 years old in 1999, and much like my first experience with Metal Gear Solid, another title I first experienced in that same year, I was sold on the production values. The colorful three-dimensional models and environments dazzled my eyes, the sound design was explosive and full of zing, the soundtrack was bouncy, adventurous, and epic, and the game being so rich with decent voice acting made it feel like I was playing an anime, around the time when I was seriously starting to get into my anime craze. If you've been watching anime since the 90s and have a good ear for voices, you might recognize a lot of folks here. Steve Bloom, Wendy Lee, Kirk Thornton, Sandy Fox, Barbara Goodson, and Mona Marshall, who voices Musashi in this. And it's so funny to me in retrospect, looking back at her other works and finding out her Musashi voice is also just kind of her default anime voice. She voices a character in Magical Knight Rayearth, for example, and it's straight up just her Musashi voice.
I'm Musashi. What's a treasure hunter?
My name's Ascot. I guess I'll consider your apprenticeship. You seem like a fun guy.
To go back to the game, I would borrow it from my cousins for an extended time period, and when I didn't have it for myself, I would rent it multiple times throughout the years until I finally got a copy for myself later down the road for $35 complete in box. And thank God I got it when I did, because nowadays this game ain't cheap physically, and it only saw a digital release in Japan.
You know, sometimes trying to share my love of certain video games can be pretty fucking frustrating at points. But before I get into the nitty gritty, I want to make clear now, and I'll be the first to say, despite playing this game for close to 25 years, this game is nothing special, especially in today's climate. I'm making a video for this game very much for the same reason I reviewed Onimusha a couple years back. I just want to talk about it and give it some proper love. Because again, this game flew under the radar for a lot of folks in favor of Final Fantasy VIII, among other things released that year. I'll get into it later. And I'm not saying folks were wrong for doing that. You like whatever the hell you like at the end of the day. But if I can properly express what is it about this game I enjoy, maybe I can get folks intrigued enough so that Square can eventually do something with the series again. A proper digital Western release for starters. I consider that a win alone. And make no mistake, this video is not going to be a Brave Fence and Musashi suck-off. It's got plenty of problems, some of which I had since my first playthrough, if you could believe it. But before we get into any of that, we got a plot to summarize, I guess.
In the dead of night and with the current absence of their king and queen, who picked a really shitty time to take a vacation, the all-you-can-eat palace finds itself under attack by the Thirst Quencher Empire, with many of the castle's inhabitants captured and placed inside these crystallized prisons known as Binjo Fields. With no other recourse outside of doing nothing, the remaining residents placed their faith in Princess Fillet to summon a hero from another world to save their kingdom, the hope being to summon the legendary brave fencer Musashi, a swordsman who once thwarted a great evil with the power of Lumina, the Sword of Luminescence. The princess manages to effectively pull off a hero summon, but like any gacha, instead of getting that SSR, she got this tiny pipsqueak that everyone immediately doubts is the actual Musashi. But the princess brings up that since no one actually knows what the dude is supposed to look like, this very well could be the Musashi they're looking for, and you know what, that's a good follow-up, points for Princess Fillet. And indeed, the kid introduces himself as Musashi, and is quick to insult everyone's attire, failing to see the irony in that statement. But proper introductions will have to wait, with the ongoing attack only getting worse, and because Musashi literally isn't allowed to leave this world until he saves the day, those are the rules, Musashi is immediately tasked with heading to Spiral Tower to retrieve Lumina to help even the odds. And as a starting bonus, he is gifted the magical Fusion Blade that can not only slice and dice and make julienne fries, but it can also temporarily absorb an enemy's abilities and make them Musashis. In little time, Musashi follows the instructions given, climbs Spiral Tower, and grabs Lumina, the Blade of Evil's Bane. And after managing to avoid certain death as the tower begins going to shit, complete with a comical Indiana Jones chase sequence, Musashi finds himself back at the palace, but alas, he's greeted by Rutrick, second lieutenant of Thirst Quencher Empire, who kidnaps the princess and sticks this ginormous steam robot on Musashi for his troubles. But Musashi's freakishly inhuman strength isn't to be underestimated, and he pulverizes the robot in due time. The Empire ceases their attack for the time being, but with the princess kidnapped and most of the castle's occupants captured, Musashi has his work cut out for him, as he now needs to follow in the steps of legendary brave fencer Musashi by traveling the land and collecting these magical scrolls, each specializing in a different element. With all 5 collected, Lumina's true power is set to be unlocked, and Thirst Quencher Empire won't know what'll hit him. Or so the books say, I don't know, they could be full of shit. Old Man Ribson and the others point Musashi towards the nearby Grillin village to begin his hunt for the 5 scrolls, but because the gondola to the village is currently busted, Musashi declares that he is the gondola, and okay then, I don't know how that works, you tell me. and thus begins Musashi's quest to save the all-you-can-eat kingdom. After that initial setup, the plot really doesn't become any more complicated than Musashi locating one of the 5 scrolls, defeating the corresponding crest guardian that was placed to protect the crest that unlocks more luminous power, and then dealing with whatever goon the Thirst Quencher Empire throws at Musashi. I don't think Musashi's story is shallow, but I also wouldn't call it deep. First off, if there's one thing this game isn't lacking, it's characters. There's a lot of them here. Like the mayor and his penchant for throwing Musashi into danger without consideration for his well-being. The shopkeepers like Jam, who runs the bakery and has a dad who somehow gets drunk off pork chops. He's a terrible father. You got Hilda here, who runs the grocery, has a son named Tim that you can find in the dictionary under the word shithead. You got Kurt, who sells you action figures, the fucking nerd. And then there's folks like Connors, who helps appraise the junk you find throughout the game and pays you money for it, even if he has the personality of broken glass. The innkeeper Hotello and his daughter Mint, the gossip girls near the well, the farmers, the priest, the lazy-ass Fours who sucks at his job and makes me play this stupid fucking Steamwood challenge twice. Go to hell, Fours! For a central hub, Grillin' Village really feels alive, yet limited. A lot of these characters aren't given much spotlight outside of introductions, and this is even if you decide to converse with them afterwards, you know? There are a few exceptions, like when you have to save Tim from becoming a Vambi in Chapter 2. That's a half zombie, half vampires for the record. Hotello by proxy gets some time to shine as a result, but after these small tidbits, they're back in the salt mines. Most of these NPCs don't experience much growth or have anything else interesting to add. And I think a big part of that is because for an action RPG, Brave Fencer Musashi lacks in side quests. It has optional content, but that only amounts to stuff like collecting action figures to play at your leisure. Yes, I do take them out of the box. They're toys. You're supposed to play with toys. You can rescue all the kingdom's inhabitants by releasing them from the crystal prisons, some of which you have to rescue anyway in order to continue the story. Or you can locate these cute little Minku creatures that permanently increase your health when you manage to pick one up and toss it like a basketball. You know, you just gotta get up close, try and... Oh, Lord. Oh my. Until you get the water scroll to make it much easier, these bastards really are the fucking worst to catch, though. It doesn't help that you can only grab and throw things when you're up a model's ass, it's so precise. Otherwise, you're just flinging your sword and causing unneeded injury. When you manage to find all 13 of these in the game, you can encounter the Mother Minku, who can easily wreck your ship because of how super aggressive she is and how much she hurts. But you know what? Considering how much damage it did to her kids, this is deserved. That's it, though. The rest of the game is all story progression, and the story isn't very layered or long. It shouldn't take you more than 8 to 10 hours to finish this on your first run. This is a very linear journey that's pretty light on fluff, only a couple of times straying from the path, and they both involve that damn Steamwood sequence. Musashi eventually collects all the scrolls, but it turns out this is what Thirst Quencher wanted all along, and the Fuhrer takes advantage of that to use the fully powered Lumina to summon the Wizard of Darkness that was sealed inside the blade. And for his troubles, the Fuhrer gets stomped. John gets stomped too. And then the thing transforms into a giant lizard and gets a Frieza-like final form that Musashi defeats by using his fusion sword to give him a good suck! And then the day is saved, with the king and queen of All-You-Can-Eat Palace returning from vacation, leaving Musashi to return Lumina to its proper resting place while strangely getting an increased poly count for this one specific exchange.
I'm the legendary brave fencer Musashi. How's it going, old man?
I'm a firm believer that there's beauty in simplicity, and overall I think the story of Brave Fencer Musashi is lighthearted fun that's ultimately harmless, and a little tonally inconsistent towards the final bits of the game. However, it's also pretty clear, if you ask me, that the game suffers from being too short to give characters and other elements room to grow. They're either quickly abandoned or underdeveloped, and that's everywhere in this game. You know, later in the story, Princess Filet gets the idea to summon another hero to try and escape confinement, and she manages to summon this dude named Kojiro, who turns out to be Musashi's rival, and it's clear that Kojiro is someone meant to be mocked. This game does play around with the Miyamoto Musashi legend, albeit so loosely it might as well be in name only. But to go back to Kojiro, my dude shows up once for a duel and then vanishes off the face of the earth until endgame, where he's then unceremoniously killed off in a way that, to me, doesn't feel intentional. It feels as if the budget just ran out and they had to do something with the guy. Although Musashi's follow-up to Kojiro dying is genuinely funny.
Shoot, it absorbed Kojiro. Oh well.
The biggest victims of this exact thing are the villains, the Thirst Quencher Empire, who are, by design, supposed to be your typical Saturday morning cartoon bad guys. But there's an element to them that I wish the game just went a little further with. The problem is that most of these guys either have little screen time or are hardly used in the first place to do anything meaningful with. Ben, Ed, and Topo of Leader's Force are your typical underlings, but I still like them for their personalities and quirks. Ben's a doofus, Ed has a stuttering problem but can also shoot fucking laser beams out of nowhere, and Topo loves to dance to a confusingly lethal degree, and the encounters with them towards the endgame are some of the most memorable fights in the game. And hey, at least you actually fight these dudes. The others got their thumbs up their asses. Bubbles and Ginger Ale, the two sisters, they're more concerned with their looks and winning the heart of their commander than trying to be soldiers, but outside of Bubbles sending Vamby soldiers after you, she's done and over with quickly. Fuck, her sister Ginger Ale doesn't do a goddamn thing in this game. You don't even clash with her, she has no impact on shit. Why is she on the front cover? She don't deserve that shit. Rutrick, the dude you run into the beginning that kidnaps the princess and apparently likes licking things.
Musashi, just hurry up and bash this hunk of lard. Ugh.
Aw, shucks! Shut up, you dumb gal, or else y'all gonna get a licking!
What do you mean by that? You run into this dude one other time when you're on your way getting your first scroll, but then this guy vanishes until endgame where he comes out of nowhere and busts a cap on poor John. Oh man, John, where do I begin? So John is a guy you meet very early on, right as you enter Grillin Village for the first time. He's locked up in the stocks, his crime's never elaborated on, so your guess is as good as mine, but the mayor tells us that he might know something about the 5 scrolls, alright? It's kind of weird, but we'll go with it. You rescue his dog Leno, you get him some water and bread, and you eventually free him, and he legit shows us his thanks by pointing us to our first piece of legendary armor that Musashi can use to find his first scroll. John's a pretty swell dude. Disappears afterwards, but then, meanwhile, back in the Legion of Doom, we're then almost immediately introduced to Colonel Capricola, who's the commander of all the other goons you run into. The girls at the squad want all of his love and attention, but it's very obvious that John and Colonel Capricola are one and the same, but to what end? We don't find that out until endgame because both John and his counterpart are barely on screen. John secretly wants to dismantle the current regime in an act of revenge. It's revealed way later that he's also the son of the former emperor of the Thirst Quencher Empire that current leader Führer Flatsky murdered to take the throne for himself. I don't know, I would have loved to get more out of that for the sake of making him and Führer Flatsky less one note. I don't mind a simple villain with simple goals, but man, why introduce that potential dynamic and then have nothing to show for it, you know? If you go out of your way to read some of the books in the library, you learn that some time ago the all-you-can-eat palace and Thirst Quencher Empire used to coexist and help each other prosper. It's the reason for all the steampunk-related contraptions throughout the game. This is never really explored outside of that, nor do any of the villains benefit or make mention of it. I won't say no to some world building no matter how small, but that's something I think could have been incorporated into the plot to give it more substance. Musashi, given the nature of him being here, I feel is the only exception to these shortcomings. He's the fish out of water, making him a good audience surrogate, learning how things work so that we do in both a literary and gameplay sense. A classical shonen hero to the letter, they established that in the first scene, and if you ask me, I'm pretty content with how Musashi grows in this game. A well-meaning, if very hot-headed dude. I just wish the game was a little less ambiguous with his age. It's played for laughs, but it's unclear if Musashi is actually a kid or, just a small dude. And I hope it's the latter because one of the residents you meet later that works in the restaurant, Wanda, gets a little too intimate with the guy in a way that makes me want to call the cops. To re-emphasize, I don't mind what we ultimately end up with. Regardless of how underdeveloped some characters and locales are, I still find most of the cast endearing. It's just, I just wish the game was a little longer to give everything proper time to shine. And for what it's worth, the game holding all these things together is solid, if a little jank, but it also suffers from things being underutilized. Combat involves using Musashi's 2 swords, Fusion and Lumina. Fusion delivers the quick hits, while Lumina brings the power. It's a little slow though, and I can only guess it's because the son of a bitch weighs a metric ton if Musashi can't swing it any faster. He can throw a giant steel ball and a fat-ass Pokemon with no problem, but this apparently is murder on the joints. You're better off doing these jumping slashes to recover faster from, or you can charge the meter and do this spin attack that also gives you a bit of invincibility frames while doing it. If you block an enemy attack and use Lumina immediately after with the meter full, you can do this hard-hitting counterattack called the Mighty Strike, which for years I didn't even know about. I guess that's what I get for not reading the manual, but nothing in the game tells you about it from what I can recall, so what the hell, this move is awesome, especially against Ben. Lumina is your primary source of damage despite its slow speed. Fusion can deal with threats and has actual combos compared to Lumina's one giant swing. It's just Fusion hits a lot weaker early on. It's more of a tool for one of Musashi's core abilities, Assimilation. Charge up the blade, toss it at an enemy, and suck it up like a smoothie. This allows Musashi to learn that enemy's special ability. You can fire energy like a machine gun, toss bowling balls at Vambies, and score that lucky strike. Suffering from poison? Save money buying antidotes and just absorb these snakes and heal yourself that way. Hell, there's even some bosses you can absorb. though the only one that comes to mind is Kojiro, the fucking loser. Not gonna lie though, that crescent beam you get from him is awesome, but it only lasts a short time. And this is one of my sticking points with Fusion. Abilities are temporary, and I really wish they weren't, because there are some legitimately great secondary moves that Musashi can learn that spice up encounters. My god, when you're raiding the soda fountain towards the end of the game, half of the fun is just absorbing the super soldiers for their scatter guns, the rocket launchers, or the grenade. Dude, the grenade is so fucking powerful, it guzzles up BP like a hungry hippo, but its destructive power cannot be denied. It's wishful thinking, or maybe I'm just spoiled, but I wish fusion abilities were permanent. I think of Kirby and how he can hold on to a copy ability for as long as he wants until, you find something better or he gets hit. Or hell, Soma Cruz in Castlevania can learn plenty of things permanently when he absorbs the souls of defeated enemies. That was one of my favorite mechanics of those games. God, I miss Castlevania. Fusion doesn't get that amount of love, and maybe that was to incentivize trying out new things so that you wouldn't grow complacent with just like the one or two really good abilities. The problem with that is, despite maybe trying to get folks to try out more things, there's a lot of abilities you can get that aren't that great. Some are just one use, like the clone bomb you can get in the Frozen Palace. Bada boom, it's gone, thank you for playing. Or something like the Sublime ability that lets your spirit survey the area and find the safest path. Now I don't mind these inside the dungeons you get them because they're less about utility and they're more of a tool to help overcome the next obstacle. That's fine, but some abilities are so context sensitive and limited that they're only useful in that one area. Musashi can't cross these vines in meandering forest, so he has to absorb this jumping flower here to get the hop ability to safely get across. And that's all you're doing with it. It comes off as a tutorial for assimilation that the game didn't need because it already gives you a tutorial on how it works in the opening minute of gameplay. And this isn't just with fusion abilities. The same shit could be said for the 5 scrolls, the main MacGuffin. Throughout the game, Musashi will obtain the Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, and Sky scroll. And it's quite a spectacle to see when Musashi nabs one of these, despite it being potentially seizure-inducing. Damn, that's so fucking cool. But when you grab a scroll, Musashi gets a new technique. The Earth scroll lets you produce a small tremor to stun enemies and knock down plot important boulders. The Water scroll envelops you in a shield that lets you walk on water for a short bit and put out fires. It also protects you one time from fire damage, and I really like that. The Fire scroll lets you shoot out a stream of fire for damage, or you can melt ice with it when you need to. The Wind scroll lets you continuously spin to dig into specific ground or bypass hazards, but considering it's only needed for plot specific things, it's more of a key to a locked door than an honest-to-God ability. The Sky scroll, do I even count this? You temporarily float for a few seconds, but 1, it's the last scroll you get as you're entering the game's point of no return, so you can't even use it in the game's other settings for completion purposes, and 2, it's only useful a handful of times in the game's final gauntlet anyway. So I only find 2 of the 5 scrolls useful for anything outside of when they're needed to continue the story, and that's the Water and Fire scrolls. The extra protection of the Water scroll is always nifty, and to mention again, it makes grabbing Minkus almost a non-issue. And the Fire scroll is a flamethrower, and I'm sorry, you just can't get me to hate flamethrowers. The Earth and Wind scroll have next to no combat applications because it's just more efficient to use basic swordplay than to use an unruly spin that deals pitiful damage, or an earthquake that may or may not stun enemies, which most of the time, it doesn't. It's this lack of permanent tools and secondary attacks that only exemplifies the second major issue I have with Fusion. You just don't have many combos to work with here. Naturally, you have one combo that you just mash the square button to do. The only other means of doing extra stuff with Fusion is by rescuing specific people. The Knights, for example, can teach you new sword combos using both Fusion and Lumina, and man, the game needed more of this and way earlier too. You go so long just having the basic attacks, and these extra maneuvers, while nothing head spinning, at least add some variety to basic combat. Kingdom Hearts, this game certainly ain't. Musashi's capable, but he ain't giving Sora any trouble if they ever meet. But hey, you can also pick up and toss things for extra damage, bonus points if you manage to hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker. As an action RPG, Musashi must travel the lands to collect the legendary 5 scrolls, rescue the palace inhabitants, and eventually rescue Princess Filet herself. Grillin Village acts as your central hub, but just beyond the borders lies meandering forest full of twists, turns, and a lot of leaky steam pipes. Beyond north awaits Twin Peak Mountain, home to most of the overworld's platforming that is not the best. You also have to visit this area several times to get everything. This game can be pretty guilty of backtracking for one specific thing. But I mean, let's face it, the backtracking can't really be helped because the game doesn't have much in these overworld locales. Outside of the village, the forest, and mountain, that's all you're getting. Now, there's still plenty of obstacles and dungeons within these areas, but the game will require you jumping between these 3 major areas a whole bunch. I guess it's a good thing that they're not very large, just don't be surprised with how much back and forth you'll be doing on your first run. The game also puts a big emphasis on the passage of time. I can't imagine how fast this planet is spinning for time to be moving this quickly, but as you travel, the time of the day shifts, and what was once a peaceful morning slowly transitions into a spooky night. In meandering forest, the music even gets a little creepier. Most of the time outside of the village, though, the time of the day is irrelevant. I mean, if you want to catch minkus, you have to wait until nighttime because they're nocturnal creatures, but everything else can be done no matter the time of the day, unless the game states otherwise. The longer you travel, the more tired Musashi will get, and once it reaches past 70% tired, which you can just check by pausing the game, Musashi's movement and attack speed will dramatically drop to the point of being unplayable. And folks, I mean it fucking sucks when Musashi gets this bad. He can also experience fatigue if his BP drops to dangerous levels, the meter that's used for special attacks with a fusion blade. So I'm guessing all these special attacks burn through calories? That's what it looks like. So how do you handle this quirk? Well, assuming you can't refill your health or BP with potential enemy drops, if you want to restore BP yourself, you gotta eat. Head to the bakery, buy yourself some bread, now you got some emergency rations. But don't keep it on you for too long, food will spoil after a few days. And do you really want to risk moldy bread? Fuck out of here with that shit. As for exhaustion, what else can I say? You gotta get some sleep. You can stop by the castle to catch some Z's if you're cheap, or if you don't feel like traveling an extra 6 feet, you can also rent a room in the inn and sleep that way. Can we talk about that for a second? So the inn is located just a couple of feet next to the entrance to the castle where you can sleep in your own room for free. Unless I need to save the game or use the nap room to pass through 3 hours of time as opposed to 8, why would I ever use the other rooms listed when the castle does the same shit for free? Can some Musashi enthusiasts answer this for me, because I legit don't get this. If you can't be bothered to make the trip back to the village though, you could buy mints from the grocery that reduces your fatigue during your journey. The game also makes a habit of putting these flower enemies in multiple spots that gives you the mint ability, which is basically a free mint. But if push comes to shove and you find yourself tired when you're nowhere near an inn, you're nowhere near the castle, you don't have any mints, no flowers to absorb, you can manually sleep yourself. Obviously, you're a sitting duck like this, and prolonged sleeping drains your BP, but it's still the best way to reduce fatigue on the cheap, and it also drastically speeds up the passage of time, which is a godsend during those time-sensitive things need to be in a certain time period to collect, like minkus or a plot-related item. Time management is going to be your worst enemy when playing this, because if you're trying to get something then and there and it ain't the right time of the day or the right day in general, and you can't multitask because your ADHD laughs at the notion, guess what? You're sleeping, and that just shits all over the pace of the game. But there are ways to make this less cumbersome. Musashi will eventually start collecting pieces of legendary armor that were said to belong to the legendary Brave Fencer Musashi. Once you take it to the pawn shop and have Connors appraise it, the item becomes yours. Some are even completely optional, like the L vest that doubles the speed of your sword charge, making it easier to activate certain abilities. There's a special cloth you can give to the castle weaver to make either the L quilt or the L gloves. For your first time, I recommend the quilt because this allows Musashi to fully restore his health, BP, and his fatigue meter just by manually sleeping. When normally sleeping outside of inns or the castle only refills your health, it drains your BP, and stops reducing fatigue at 20%. The L gloves, on the other hand, increases your critical hit ratio, and I find that more useful throughout, particularly in the last section of the game, where the game completely drops the need to sleep and removes the tired mechanic outright. The most puzzling piece to me are the L goggles. This lets you appraise items yourself without needing to bring it to the pawn shop first. Normally when Musashi finds something he doesn't recognize, you have to take it to Connor's pawn shop to find out what it really is, and then you can sell it to him for some cash. Bedpans, shovels, panties, it doesn't matter, the grumpy fuck will take it. The issue here is that the junk you find can only be sold to Connor, so being able to appraise items yourself or not, you still have to go to the pawn shop to sell it to Connors in the first place to get rid of it. So I'm struggling to think why this was even a thing. That said, you still want to get the goggles anyway, because without these got in the frozen palace, so you need the L boots to travel across slippery surfaces, but you get the L boots inside the frozen palace, so if you don't have the goggles to appraise them yourself and immediately get the perks then and there, that means your ass has to go all the way back to town to get Connors to appraise the boots and then make your way back to the frozen palace to continue the adventure. And I'm not saying that's what happened to me on my first playthrough. What the fuck makes you think that? The mandatory pieces are, in essence, movement upgrades. Outside of the L boots, the L brace lets you climb certain walls. It's more of a means of story progression, though, since you don't use it for much else. The L belt gives you a double jump, which makes the game's platforming a hell of a lot more manageable, but it's given to you after you already tackled the game's biggest platforming challenges in the ruins underneath the restaurants, so swing and a miss there, guys. Not to go too off tangent, but the platforming in this game could really stink up the whole joint. Without the double jump, Musashi feels like he weighs a ton with just a single jump, and there's points where the precision needed is just a bit much. Next time, if there is a next time, shut up, I'd rather a double jump be something we get much earlier, if not have it inherently. It's a small thing for me, but I personally love how the new pieces of armor are reflected on Musashi's model as he collects them. It gives me the same dopamine rush I experience when I'm collecting armor pieces in Mega Man X. And as confusing as the goggles are in the first place, I can't deny that they look damn good on Musashi. I'm a big sucker for aesthetical goggles. Grillin Village is where you'll revisit for most of your adventure. It's a pretty standard town. You can talk to townsfolk, get to know the locals. I think this dude's wife eventually passes from an illness towards the end of the game, but hey, at least I get a cool action figure for it. You can stock up on supplies in one of the area's many stores. Some stores even offer discounts if you visit them during specific days of the week. And to some degree of annoying realism, some stores are closed outright on specific days. Fucking Connors and his closed on Mondays bullshit. Listen, I hate Mondays too, but I have shit I want to pawn off. It's the goggles? Baby, I can change. Yeah, well. You know, this game was touted as the PlayStation's Zelda killer during its release. And at first I thought, oh yeah, you swing swords, pick shit up. Zelda won't know what hit him. But it was mainly because this game was unfortunately competing against the upcoming Ocarina of Time, which released just a couple of months after this game did. Damn. Now, I love this game, and I get wanting to label something as a Zelda killer to increase the hype for it, the anticipation, but this ain't beating Zelda anytime soon. Zelda gave you shit to do both outside and inside the main story. Meanwhile, the story progression in this game is all it has. And it's pretty no nonsense about it. It doesn't meander, I mean, except for the Steamwood stuff. Okay, I know I mentioned it like 3 times already, but this was always my least favorite part of the game. You got a time limit and it's a hard game over if it reaches 0. And that clock is based off of the in-game timer, so that shit ticks down fast, making me even more anxious. The timing to fill the pressure gauge towards the second half gets precise as shit. The second round requires you locate the proper valves first before you can even begin doing the mini game, and it's very easy for you to miss some jumps when you got to go around the steam son of a bitch, and you gotta do all this twice. Steamwood can blow me, which is ironic because it looks like a giant metal penis. But despite this, I think the game's energy and vibe is consistently strong. You know, outside of Steamwood, I feel there's never really a dull moment because the game is damn efficient on keeping you moving with the current story beat. And it's next to impossible to get lost as long as you practice common RPG sense, you know, talk to townspeople, revisit old areas when you have new abilities or techniques, shit like that. Every chapter also climactically ends with a boss fight. And some are worse than others. I mean, they all have the problem of repeating phases too fast, but they're all very involved, testing you and your knowledge of the elemental scroll needed to win the day. The Scorpion in Hell's Valley that I love when I get to throw a giant rock at its face. The Relic Keeper in the underground ruins that starts fighting with us because no shit, I think Musashi hurts this guy's feelings.
What a loser! The ceiling's collapsed and he can't move! Geek!
Musashi's a jerk. The Frost Dragon was always my favorite, visually speaking. Yeah, it's just an ice dragon, but you know what? It shoots laser beams and it looks cool, pardon the pun. Actually, don't pardon the pun. Kiss my ass. I don't care what you think. This game is drowning in food puns, so I ain't holding back either. The Queen Ant I never really liked because despite having the presence of a proper boss, the fight just takes too damn long, as I said. The Tower of Death towards the end game, first off, Tower of Death, that's a killer fucking name. This thing has too many head points, but I wouldn't call the fight boring. No, it can be frantic with how you suddenly have to start mastering the Sky Scroll ability, which you just got on the way to this dude. But what really enhances all these guys for me, even the ones I don't care much for, it has to be the music. And I want to say this was my first real exposure to composer Tsuyoshi Sekido, who's been working under Square since 1995 and still composes for them to this day. God damn, this soundtrack is so full of energetic whimsy, intensity. It's calming yet loves to be larger than life, and it can be creepy. You know that tune that plays in the beginning of the very first review I ever posted on this channel, the SGB Dead Rising video? Yeah, that track's from Brave Fencer Musashi. Okay, that's enough looking at this. If I cringe any harder, my face is going to become a fucking anus. Anyway, there's so much variety in this soundtrack. You rarely hear a track repeat. So many areas have a unique tune to them, which helps make them all feel different from one another. It's at its best though when you're fighting something, and god, they all slap. My favorite is easily the Relic Keeper. For a dude we emotionally bully into fighting, this guy has a simply wonderful track that I think summarizes all the adventurous feelings I get when I play this game. But I gotta admit, it's been hard for me to properly explain what is it about Brave Fencer Musashi I enjoy so much, despite its obvious problems. I mean, a big part of it is because I got those rose-tinted glasses on. I can't help it, but god damn it, man, this game has a shit ton of charm, I feel. It's an easy to pick up action RPG that definitely needed like another 6 months of dev time, but what it has already is enough to make this game a hell of an underdog title. As a kid who was starting to develop a huge love of shonen anime and loved seeing damage numbers go up, this game was doing it for me. Shit, in the opening minutes of the game, I'm already hooked because I get to listen to some goofy voice acting, the music was filling the scenery nicely, I get 2 swords, one of them lets me suck up goons and then shoot things like a machine gun. The first boss, the Steam Knight, you take apart his joints with your big sword, and when he goes flying back, you follow up by picking him up and throwing him through the fucking wall. I love that shit. Damn, this game has great sound design. I mentioned it earlier, but this game is pretty good about making swordplay and other attacks sound crunchy for that feeling of satisfaction. Hell, just a good mighty strike is enough to make me pitch a tent. I realize though that the game might be a little too jank for today's crowd. The platforming is just plain awkward until you get the double jump, and the control isn't the smoothest or precise D-pad or analog stick otherwise. The camera can be a little too close for Musashi at points, and elsewhere it being fixed can make traveling through narrow passages like the mazes inside the Frozen Palace more trouble than it's worth. God, your inventory space is so tiny in this. It's earthbound bad. And later on, it starts getting full of items you can't remove for plot reasons. But the thing is, for me, the game isn't long or large enough for most of these issues to become deal breakers for me. But they do remain annoying throughout, you get me? One day, it's my hope that this game gets a proper Western release on digital platforms so that folks don't have to resort to emulation just to play the game. I mean, if you really want to get a physical copy of this game just to play it, by all means, you do what you want. But I don't think it's worth spending an arm and leg just to legally try it, you know? My biggest hope, and I realize this may never happen, I'd love to see this game get a remake, or at least a remaster. There's so much that could be done with the world of Musashi that the original barely touches upon. Musashi and the other cast of characters are such a bag of goofy fun that I'd love to see that properly explored and developed. Give us more side quests, something more to do other than story. Have more sword combos and magic abilities to make combat more thrilling. Do something more with the day and night cycle outside of story-related events in the shops. Make the platforming better. Remove Steamwood. The PS2 game Musashi Samurai Legend tried to do something of the sort, but it wasn't very good. The game bored me to tears. Yeah, tears. I wanted to like this game so much more, but it fell so flat and it disappointed me that after this, Square has done nothing else with the Musashi series. Can it even be called a series if there's only 2 games that are not even related? I'll have to play it again one day for a video to properly explain what is it about it I don't like, but that is for another time. Nostalgia carries this game big time for me, but you know, folks ask me all the time, what's one of your favorite games in the PlayStation 1 that no one talks about? I always tell them, that's Brave Fencer Musashi. How's it going, old man?
All right, and with that said and done, I promise next time we will be resuming our Final Fantasy adventures. So the plan is Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy X-2 before we close off that chapter in our next Final Fantasy revisit. However, I also realize for RPGs back-to-back, or as back-to-back as I can make them anyway, not everyone's going to enjoy that. That's not everyone's cup of tea, so I will be squeezing in other individual videos between each ROM, because they're RPGs. They take a while to record, they take a while to write for, they take a while to edit. So I will be squeezing in other videos between then. We've got some Sonic the Hedgehog related stuff on the horizon, and You're damn right I'm taking time to look at stuff like that. I got the Shadow X Sonic Generations, and that's not due to October, but before I know it, October is going to be here, and I got to make time for it. So yeah, rest assured we will be squeezing in some individual videos between RPGs, because I know not everyone enjoys the RPG videos, but I like them. But all right, let's continue with more patron shoutouts, and we refreshed the list. So we got a whole bunch of people to thank for today's video, because I am overdue. All right, so once again from the top, shout outs to more of my $10 patrons over on patreon.com/Somecallmejohnny. Pyrus Zyro, F4VB, SGM92, Lackwee, Nick Plays 28, The Upchucks, Seth Anderson, Ian Bow, Melvin Brown, Park the Irish, Taylor, Killamox, Jacian, Lizzy in a Tizzy, Ed and Ein, Royal Tro, Link Tholodist, Daniel Conlon, Jack Pyri, or Piri. I Am Loaf, Telling Star, Dakota Lewis, Frisk925, David Siegel, Riley Dilworth, Anime Pirates, Phazon Witch, Alex K. Rollin, Arizo97, The Eternal Comet, Smash the Oni, Bojack51, Logan Poole, Martin Lorimore, Akuru, was it Akurui? Sora? SKB99 is probably what I should have said there. Mr. Nanukes, Vira, Fatboy Smo, Joe Taylor, Triple X, Kenneth Saul, Dylan Brogdon, Pampert Gill, Jacob Jordan, Tobin Goss, Michael Taylor, Dennis James Mon, Jeffersonia, Beaster Galaxy, Demon Slayer DJ, Floofy Foxers, Kane Craig 17, Alfredo Jones, The Red Dragoon, Eduardo Quezada, Medeiros, okay, Payday, Pumpkin Fox, Gumshoe Gamer, M Gear, Penny Dread Foxel, or Dread FXL, Joe Abazia, Joseph Ritchie, Matt Donovan, SJ the Hero, Owen Shadow 76, Storfish, JC Prime 404, John Hanlon, Sarui SRC, Pine Dine, ooh, creamy, Tariq Jones, Bilbo Baggins, Brandon Ellis, Joy Alma, Conifer SSR, Jack Cookson, AJ Sproul, Radiant GV, Samuel 1246, The Lucid Gamer, Stardust Chaos, Delwyn Rosa, Crazy Man, Billy Bob Bo 1, Cyclone Silver, Spider-Manny, Super SP, Kazoo Foxfire, Simply Chillin', Hugh Quinn, Egg Roll Buddy, Metroid 1999, Freelancer Marcy, Caius, The Dervinator, Solaris, Mr. Barebones, Turst, Dustin Ross, Pax Bernhardt, Nick Anderson, Frozen Spaghetti, Aiden Ferguson, Tim Arendt, Colonado, Mr. Boost, Scruff, Jonathan Millord, Xavier Andrews, Chris, Silence32, Critical Link, Bracky Zach, Steve Roethlisberger, The Quirky Frog, Xehanort, Retrocast, Boardman, Katie Newen, Francis of the Filth, Dreaming VA, James, Mojo LaCroix, and finally for today, A Alto, or is it Alto? There's two ways there. Is it like how you pronounce Aaron as Aaron? I don't know. But all this and more in the end of the next video, and I'm kind of curious as to how long the Final Fantasy VIII video is going to be, because the last couple of Final Fantasy games that I covered are any indication, they're only going to get longer. I think about Final Fantasy VIII. How long is the 9 video going to be? Because I got a lot to talk about Final Fantasy IX. But that will have to wait for the Final Fantasy IX video. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for your love and support. I do apologize for making you wait once again, but I'm done saying that. Let's just move on to the next video. Well, all that and more in the next video. As always, thank you all for watching. Stay safe out there. Have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.